Lovely to see so many people here. Today's panel is wind propulsion, what's real, what's verified. And I think this is really important in the backdrop of what we have, all the turmoil in the industry at the moment. We're going to bring some certainty to the world, I'm hoping, from this panel. So I'd just quickly like to introduce myself. My name's Gavin Allwright. I'm the Secretary General of the International Windship Association, so basically the trade body that represents wind propulsion in the industry. On my left here is Luke McEwen, Anemoi's Technical Director. Daniel Weiss. Sorry. Okay, I'll do Tobias. Okay, Tobias Groeger, Business Development Manager at Lloyd's Register. And Daniel Weiss, Shipping Strategy at Vale. So welcome to the panel. We're talking basically, how we're going to ensure that the performance of wind propulsion technologies is verified, it's transparent, trusted, robust, but also in a useful way that the industry can really take this on board. That's really where we're heading, and I'm going to be asking a few direct questions. So an opening statement. You get 2 minutes each. Luke, would you like to start off? From your perspective, why is third-party performance verification important for rotor sales and wind propulsion in general? And what challenges do you face in demonstrating effectiveness?
There's lots and lots of wind propulsion providers. There's more and more every year cropping up. We all make claims about the performance of our equipment. And from a ship owner or a charterer's perspective, if you're the decision maker on, do I invest in this? You're making an investment decision which is going to last you years or decades. So you want to be absolutely sure that what you're investing in is going to pay back in the long term. And just believing the manufacturer is not always going to be the way that you want to go if you want to be certain. So that's where third-party verification comes in. So we are, you'll have seen the press release about our recent verified performance results on the Kamsarmax TR-Lady. That was verified by Lloyd's Register. And it's people like Lloyd's Register Advisory that have the credibility in the industry because they have the detailed understanding of all of the factors that can affect the performance. We obviously share our data with the owner and the charterer, but it's also their vessel data, so that can't be shared publicly. So the way to get around that problem is to use a third party who has the expertise to drill into the results and make sure that it's correct. You also mentioned what are the challenges. The obvious challenge is that wind propulsion depends on the wind, and the wind is continuously varying. And so as the sea state, so are the waves, which heavily affect the resistance of the ship. The ship has fouling on the underside, which changes week by week. More and more things grow on it. So you can't just compare last year's fuel consumption with this year's fuel consumption. The sails interact with the ship. They interact with each other. The ocean currents change all the time. So if you're using the speed log to measure the speed through water, that has variability. If you're using GPS to use the speed over the ground, that's affected by the currents. So there's all these different factors which can affect the results, and that's why you need a really solid methodology, which is what we've worked on so hard with Lloyd's Register to develop, and will shortly be published so that everybody can have a look at it, and we're completely open.
And we'll come to the third-party verification in a moment, but I'd like to put that over to Daniel. How does this verified performance data impact your decision making? To support wind propulsion technologies like rotor sails. Please give us your experience.
Thank you for the question. A bit of context first for who doesn't know us. We are a fairly big mining company. Vale, the mines are in Brazil, and we ship these volumes over long distances. So on ton-mile basis, we are fairly big, and we have a large fleet of big vessels. And we're constantly fighting against this geographic disadvantage because to make things worse, our competitors are much closer to the main market than we are. So the question of how to decarbonize in the most efficient way possible is a very important one. And we built for example, a fleet planning tool, a fleet optimization tool, which, as all optimization tools, depend on the quality of the inputs, right? As people often say, rubbish in and rubbish out. So these pilots and this verified data feeds directly into this fleet planning tool, which then improves the outcome and informs us what we have to do today. For example, as an additional fact, we are now building, not us, but we just chartered on a long-term basis, 10 Weber Max vessels that are being built by Shandong, and these are wind-assisted as well.
I think that's fantastic. Yeah, but I would, and I'm sure you would as well, Luke. Tobias, we've heard from the tech provider, we've heard from their customer. Third party, what role do you play in verifying this performance claims, and what standards or frameworks are you using or developing at the moment?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for being invited. It's a pleasure being here. What is our role? I think you mentioned it, or the two of you mentioned it already. Our role is to be the independent voice, the independent party. And that means that basically we are trying to act as impartial and as independent as we can to make sure that in the end, whatever is presented as a result is as robust, reliable, predictable, repeatable as possible. We've seen and we hear from time to time requests, hey, can you come on board and do some kind of verification? But please, can you use this matrix or can you use that kind of algorithm, et cetera, et cetera? And there we have to clear state, no, we won't. If ever we are asked to do whatever we do, and in this project we have done, or we were asked, let's say, on two elements, to review, like Luke mentioned, the methodology, as well as then also to review and assess the performance later on. And we said, yeah, we are happy to do so, we're happy to partner up, but we do it basically our way and give recommendations so that in the end, let's say, we are independent and impartial to this. What standards do we apply? I mean, there is one standard at the moment, that's the ITTC, the International Towing Tank Conference, which has a protocol for sea trial assessment. Like Luke mentioned, that's a protocol to have a standard on sea trial assessments for wind-assisted propulsion. However, it comes with its challenges and deficits, such as you mentioned, wind is wind, and whatever you get, so that's whatever you have to take. So it's not ideal. In addition to this, we apply the ISO 19030 standard, which has been developed, I think, 10, 15 years ago to be applied for underwater performance prediction and analysis. However, we tune it against the wind-assisted propulsion elements, such as that we factor in the devices, the technologies, etc., to make it usable for wind-assisted support as well. Once that is in place, then we basically apply our ship development support performance model, which is a combination of many elements. So we apply the CFD analysis on the installation, and that is important on the installation, not on the device. So that basically loops in, let's say, the rotor sails in this example, including the superstructure, including all the disturbing element. We apply machine learning algorithms to make sure, let's say, that the ship performance data, either on the real basis as well as, let's say, on the predictive basis, are tuned as best as possible. That's an algorithm which makes use, let's say, of an ever-evolving database. So the more data we get, the better, let's say, the models are. And a few other factors are then coming into to make sure that in the end the results are as predictable and as reliable as possible.
And I think as Daniel mentioned, garbage in, garbage out. So we got the best data possible. Just to develop this a little bit further, I'm glad you brought up the ISO standards. Those are actually under review at the moment, and there's one being developed for rotor sails in particular, I believe. But what does a credible verification look like in practice? We're talking about verifying, we're talking about validating, but what does this actually look like in practice? Luke, would you like to take that away?
There's lots of different ways that you could try and assess how good is wind propulsion. You can look at last year's performance before you put the sails on and then compare it with this year's performance with the sails. You can try and measure the thrust directly with strain gauges or pressure sensors. But all of those methodologies miss some of the key challenges we talked about earlier. So the industry is converging on the same methodology, essentially, which is on-off testing. And that's the methodology which we used and was verified by Lloyd's. It's the same basis for the ITTC standard and the new DNV standards which are being developed, which are all essentially converging on the same pathway. So the verification part of it then is just about, are you doing that correctly? Are you taking into account everything properly? Are you looking at the changes in the propeller efficiency, for example? So when you turn on sails, you unload the propeller and its efficiency improves. That makes a big difference. So if you don't think of all of these different things, and this is where the expertise comes in from the likes of Lloyd's Register, that you need to know about it, you need to know what effect it's going to have and account for it properly. So it's having that deep understanding of the physics behind it that makes the difference.
Okay. So let's take this into a little bit more into the business world. And Daniel, what increases your confidence in manufacturers' claims? Because we don't believe a word that Luke says.
Come on.
You don't ask your barber for a haircut, right? That's how it goes. No, I think if we do also our CFD calculations before, and when all things were correctly, what we've seen is the real data is very much aligned to those. So that's not the big issue. I think the issue is, as with all new technologies, is things don't work perfectly from the start. You have some issues with off-fire. This is normal. I think well-defined maintenance agreements that allow for quick corrective actions go a big step in that direction. In our case, where their own voyage is very long, 90 days, right? 45 days one way. Ideally, you want to have presence on the discharge ports, loading ports, maybe Cape of Good Hope, so you can have these quick actions undertaken.
And that sort of brings us to a little bit of the scaling issue. I mean, we're at around about 70 ships in operation at the moment with some form of wind assist on board. We're accelerating quickly now. Things are developing quickly. From an LR perspective, these emerging standards, the standardized approach, how can that be accelerated? And two, do you see that as a major sort of driver for this scaling, is having these standard approaches?
I think, let's say, to make sure how can these be developed further, we need to understand, or we need to be clear about the objectives of every project. I mean, if we take, let's say, this wind assisted propulsion as an example, we can ask, hey, can you verify the performance? And we can say, yes, we can. But what is the actual performance you're talking about? Are you talking about the power savings just derived by the device itself? Are you talking about the fuel savings, which eventually considers the additional fuel you need to spin the rotors? Or are you considering, let's say, a total cost of ownership approach where other influencing factors such as maintenance, such as training for the crews, such as additional watchkeepers, etc., are considered? So depending on where we are coming from, respectively what the question is, we need to be clear what is it we are talking about. Once that is in place, for sure, then we can consider, let's say, to get this, let's say, further developed. Now, when we think about, or when we talk about developing further, again, we need to consider two different elements. First of all, is the verification of the data, of the performance. That's one thing. But that's already the second step in the logical consequence, whereby the first step is the methodology, like Luke mentioned it in his introduction words. So before we think about analyzing what can we do, what frequency of data, what sensors do we have to install, how do we ensure, let's say, that the quality of data is safe, etc., we need to have we need to make sure that the methodology we apply is robust, repeatable, etc. So we are part of the IMO Green Voyage 2020-50 working group, and as such we are trying, let's say, to collect the feedback from all the stakeholders, such as yourselves, to make it, let's say, in a easy to understand way and forward, let's say, with the respective bodies. We try to make sure that, let's say, the regulatory elements, such as, let's say, the fuel EU is a good example where the wind-assisted propulsion is considered in a favorable way, and God knows what else is to come in the future, are collected. And then, last but not least, we see yourselves as a good influencing body, let's say, to take up the challenges which we have, be it on a geopolitical way, be it, let's say, on the data acquisition, be it, let's say, on the data processing part, etc., so that in the end, if we take, let's say, the ITTC as a standard, it's a good standard, as we know, let's say, with the challenges coming along, so that we take this in a combined package. To make it short, ideally, we would need a unified front where all the stakeholders, vendors, shipping companies, service providers, associations are working together to make it workable in a most effective way.
Right. Yeah, I know I shouldn't come on stage because I always get reminded of how much more work I got to do. The one question I'm always asked, or more frequently asked even now, is we want to see more third-party data available. We want to see more public data available. So is Anemoi sort of willing to share this data and get this data into third-party review, and then maybe anonymize or aggregate that data into more publicly available
Absolutely,
forms?
yeah. I mean, the whole purpose of the exercise is about building trust, because in the end, somebody needs to agree that they're going to spend some money equipping their ship with wind propulsion. If they don't have that trust in the providers and in the process, then why are they going to do that? So we're obviously sharing our results from the TR Lady. We will be later sharing results from the Sohar Max, also installed with even more sales, even bigger sales, which is very exciting. So we are at an exciting point in the industry, and we're running through these pilot projects. And the whole point of the pilot projects is to inform the decision-making about bigger fleet rollout. So if we don't share the data, then we're never going to reach that point. Having said that, obviously we can't share data from the fuel consumption from a client's vessel. So again, this is where the third parties come in, because they can come in under NDA, inspect all the data, say, yes, we know this is correct, this end result is correct, but without sharing the day-by-day fuel consumptions and what the wind was doing and so on.
So that collaboration is the new fuel?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I thought I'd throw that one in. So very quickly, I'm going to let Daniel start with this. Just one sentence, final sentence to wrap this up, and then we'll take some questions if we have enough time. Single most important way or step that the industry needs to take to make performance verification robust and trusted. I think Luke's already touched on some of that. But
Exactly. I think that I'll say nothing new. It's share the operational data, can be anonymous, have it verified by third parties, and share it with everybody. That's it.
Sounds good. Tobias.
I can only echo basically what my co-fellow said, rephrase it a little bit and say, well, it's transparency is key. Transparency, if we are not at a stage where we're transparent, no one will trust in us. However, so if we are transparent, like Luke mentioned, let's say the paper will be published soon by us and by Anemoi and us. In that transparency, we create trust, and in the end, trust hopefully gives and money relies on trust, and that transparency.
Trust. We got money. Luke, do you want to add anything?
Road sales are great. It is about building that trust and understanding the pros and the cons of each technology, and being able to make decisions on a sort of apples with apples basis.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much. So we've got time for maybe one or two quick questions, but I know that the Anemoi team will be happy to answer questions at their booth, and I'll give you the number of the booth later. And also, if you catch me later, I'm more than happy to answer, and I'm sure Tobias and Daniel are. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes. Could you identify yourself as well, please?
From Napa. Maybe question for Luke and Daniel, maybe, but others feel free to answer. This number of installations is growing fast, but is there something that's preventing it from growing even faster? Is it lack of production capacity or lack of trust for these new technologies, or cooperation between owners and charterers? What's holding back?
Okay, that's a very good question. I would say it's the industry is scaling up. It's a nascent industry. I mean, wind-assisted propulsion and other solutions are offered by basically startups. Okay, and there is an issue with scaling up. So I think that's it. But they are scaling up fast, and with regulation now paving the way, there's a lot of demand coming. And I think my message also for the industry and others is you have to be prepared for the demand that's coming.
Yeah. So from Anemoi's side, we're already scaling up production, ready for the the big ramp up in demand driven by the regulations, particularly the new IMO regulations. From the owner's side, what we see is that this process of doing a pilot project or watching somebody else doing a pilot project, if you're a sitting on the fence kind of business, but if you're an early mover like Vale, you've got to go through your pilot project, you've got to assess the results, you've then got to make your decisions about, am I putting it on a batch of 10 new vessels, for example. They need to get built. So that process just takes time. And I think there's probably been historically some over-optimism in the industry about, one year we'll make 1, next year we'll make 1,000, and after that we'll make 1 million. It doesn't happen that way because it takes time to go through this process, to get the results, to verify it, and then make those decisions on investment. So, but it's definitely happening. What we see is definitely happening.
Yeah. Tobias, did you want to make any comment there?
Maybe comment from us being a little bit from the outside. I think what would definitely help, where we all are working on, is to have case studies. We are working on this, and case studies are a good example. Let's say in the end, to create trust, to give that level, that needed level of transparency, which would then in return, hopefully, give the confidence to those who are willing to invest into this. And we see a steep uptake. I mean, if we compare the numbers from 2020 onwards, it's rapidly increasing. But with the challenges Luke and Daniel just described, so we are getting there, and better be a little bit moderate, but on the safe side, rather than be too fast and too agile, and then somewhat regret the decision later because it hasn't been based on a robust foundation.
If I could just add just one little comment to round that off, being from Napa as well, most of the statistics that are put out into the industry are based on motor vessel profiles. They're not based on weather routing for wind, which I know Napa is one of the leads on there. So you can get far better results if you're actually moving and changing your operational profile on vessels as well, and more integration into the vessels. But the last thing I'll just say is that we have a pipeline of about 120 vessels on order that will have wind installed, multiple rigs, and also I think the production capacity now is in the mid to high hundreds potential right now. So, and the scaling is going up. I know, Anemoi, you have a factory in China.
Yes.
And there are other companies that are building up that capacity too. So, but on that note, hopefully that was a positive end to that note. I do apologise, there's not enough time for any more questions, but please do come and grab these three gentlemen. And also the Anemoi stand is at the UK Pavilion, D0512E. I'm getting old, I can't read it with the same glasses. So I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer about their specific technology. And hopefully I'll see you in other seminars and around over the next couple of days. Thank you.